We are closely following the developments in the Middle East. The United States has already sent a second aircraft carrier to this region of the world. The aircraft carrier Nimitz is currently near Singapore and will soon arrive. It will be stationed in close proximity to the combat zone. It is reported that it will join another American aircraft carrier, the Carl Vinson. In this way, the Americans are increasing their military presence. Additionally, American refueling tankers are also being deployed to the Middle East, which could serve as indirect confirmation that the United States intends to support the Israel Defense Forces in its conflict with Iran. The IDF has reported new strikes on command centers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The Wall Street Journal reports that the Iranian leadership, through an intermediary in Arab countries, is sending signals to the US and Israel about its readiness to immediately resume negotiations on the nuclear program. This is a clear indication that the situation is developing in the most unsatisfactory way for Tehran. The price of Russian oil has jumped by almost 15% in recent days due to the war in the Middle East. Meanwhile, in Crimea, the Russian occupation authorities have arrested the former commander of the Special Forces Battalion of Ukraine's Interior Ministry troops, who sided with the occupiers in 2014. As the saying goes, traitors are needed by no one. In Latvia, the leader of the Stability Party, Alexis Roslikovs, has been arrested, the very same one who shouted from the Saima podium, "There are more of us. Russian is our language." Trump is apparently going to make a decision on sanctions against Russia in the near future. The United States has also canceled talks with Russian representatives on normalizing relations. And finally, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service claims that an attack on the American fleet in the Baltic Sea is being prepared under the guise of a Russian sabotage operation and blames Ukrainian and British special services for this. All this and more coming up next. So the United States is redeploying the second aircraft carrier, the Nimitz, from the South China Sea. At the moment, it is located not far from Singapore, and the Nimitz will join another American aircraft carrier, the Carl Vinson, which has 36 F-18 fighters and 12 F-35s on board. The Nimitz is currently expected to reach its destination off the coast of Israel in approximately 1 week from now, as planned, according to officials. The United States has also launched a campaign to transfer tanker aircraft from American bases to Europe. In particular, according to Military Watch, by the morning of June 16, 30 CS-135 and KC-46 tanker aircraft had already landed at airfields in Europe. They are used for aerial refueling of both US Air Force and Israeli aircraft. In other words, they are compatible with Israeli aircraft as well. According to Military Watch, this should facilitate new strikes against Iran. Meanwhile, in Tehran, there are suspicions that the United States may soon join the war against Iran on Israel's side, since according to sources cited by Axios, Netanyahu approached Donald Trump with a request to join the military operation against Iran, and according to one of Axios' interlocutors, Trump allowed for the possibility that he might participate in a military operation against Iran during a phone conversation with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In addition, as reported by Axios, Israel needs large bombers necessary to destroy the Iranian uranium enrichment facility in Fordo, which is built into a mountain. The Israeli military does not have the appropriate guided aerial bombs, but they are in service with the US Air Force. It is also reported that since last fall, the Americans have increased their contingent in the Middle East to 43,000 personnel, which is approximately 13,000 more than before. Also, apparently, in addition to the aircraft carriers Nimitz and Carl Vinson, the aircraft carrier George Washington may soon be deployed to the Arabian Sea as well, having recently left its permanent station in Japan. Thus, this is the largest deployment of American aircraft carriers to a single region in several years. Their presence here naturally will be seen as the possibility of the imminent involvement of the US armed forces in a military operation on the side of the Israeli army. Naturally, all of this is causing extremely serious concern in Tehran, which is literally seeing Israeli Air Force planes overhead. Earlier reported that, according to the Wall Street Journal, the closest advisors to Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei have begun secret negotiations with representatives of the Kremlin regarding escape routes to Russia. In other words, they are planning to follow the path of the Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. Today, the Wall Street Journal released another important piece of information that Iran, through intermediaries in Arab countries, has sent a signal to the leadership of Israel and the United States about its readiness to resume negotiations on its nuclear program. At the same time, the Wall Street Journal cites Middle Eastern and European officials. Tehran reports that it is ready to return to the negotiating table in the near future on the condition that the United States military does not join the Israeli attacks. But as we can see, even if this does not happen, the gun is already loaded. The American Magnum is already loaded, and it is clearly pointing its barrel toward Tehran. As the Wall Street Journal writes, since Israeli military aircraft can freely fly over the Iranian capital, that is, and Iranian counterattacks cause minimal damage, Israeli leaders have little incentive to halt their offensive before they take further steps to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities and further weaken the power of the theocratic government. According to official data, during the attacks in Iran, 128 people were killed, while in Israel, 21 people died as a result of Iran's retaliatory strikes, including 5 Ukrainian citizens, which I reported on the previous day. As one of the inevitable consequences of the military conflict between Israel and Iran, which many experts had warned about, the price of oil has surged, including for the Russian-grade Urals. There was an almost 15% spike in price. As of June 13, Urals was trading at 5,000 rubles per barrel. There you have it. Although 3 days earlier, it was being sold for less than 4,400 rubles. That was the minimum price. Nevertheless, it is reported that in any case, this does not match the price that the Russian government is counting on. Ultimately, the price that was set in the Russian budget is 6,700 rubles per barrel. In any case, the current price is lower. However, a prolonged war could lead to further increases, including for Russian Urals oil potentially reaching triple digits and thus possibly hitting the mark of $130. It is reported that if the military conflict ends in the near future, oil prices will increase by only about $5 per barrel compared to pre-war levels. Thus, a swift end to this military conflict is undoubtedly in Ukraine's interest, since it would prevent Russia from profiting significantly from the speculative rise in oil prices, including those of the Russian Urals grade. Meanwhile, technological disasters continue to occur on Russian civilian airlines. In the past week alone, at least 7 aircraft belonging to Russian civilian airlines have either broken down in the air or were unable to take off due to technical problems. The most recent such incident involved the Sukhoi Superjet 100 operated by the Russian airline Azimut at Vnukovo Airport. During takeoff, it lost the cowling of its right engine. This was reported by the Telegram channel Aviatoshina. It took off into the air. The plane circled above Vnukovo for over an hour in order to burn off fuel in the holding area. And after an hour, it landed. Fragments of the cowling were found on the runway. As a result, they could have caused an air disaster for other aircraft taking off from that runway. Naturally, all of this is a consequence of the sanctions imposed on Russian civil aviation, and it demonstrates the rapid wear and increased accident risk of the Russian air fleet. Some people say the sanctions don't work. They work, and how? In Crimea, the Russian FSB has detained and opened a criminal case against the former commander of the Special Forces Battalion of the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs Internal Troops, Serhiy Solomko. In particular, it is known that he took part in suppressing mass protest actions on the Maidan in Kyiv and switched to serve the enemy in 2014. He served in Ukraine as part of and commanded the 47th Special Purpose Regiment Tiger of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, which was based in Crimea. In December 2013, this regiment was transferred to Kyiv to suppress the protests, and in February 2014, it returned to the peninsula. He himself claimed that he was allegedly wounded during the events on the Maidan. In addition, After switching sides to serve the enemy, he became the commander of a battalion of the internal troops of the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs, received an award for distinguished service, and then, naturally, as a traitor, he was added to the list of unreliable individuals and sent to Severbaikal following the usual pattern, to the Severbaikal separate training naval detachment in Buryatia. Well, where else could they have sent him after that? Now he's retired, but nevertheless he was arrested. You might ask, what was he arrested for? For contact with foreigners. Yes, foreigners. In other words, he talked to someone. Well, in fact, it's the classic charge from the Soviet era, Stalin's Brezhnev's times contact with foreigners. Who he was in contact with is unclear. But now it seems this colonel is going to do time, and for a long time, as we can see, even our enemies don't like traitors. Meanwhile, in Latvia, representatives of the local security services came to the politician and leader of the Stability Party, Alexei Roznikov, the very one who gave a speech in the Saeima in Latvian and ended it by shouting, "There are more of us and Russian is our language." It is reported that the Latvian State Security Service conducted appropriate searches at his place following his statements. He was suspected of inciting national discord and hatred, as well as assisting the aggressor state Russia, and also of actions against Latvia. In the 2025 Riga City Council elections, the Stability Party received almost 7%, specifically 6.94%. It is oriented towards Russian-speaking voters and is considered populist. And after being elected to the Riga City Council, Rozlikov, lost his parliamentary immunity as a member of the Saeima. Well, that's the kind of character we're dealing with, as they say. The guy worked his way up to success for a long time, and he finally made it. So what about Trump? Trump, meanwhile, according to reports from his former national security advisor, Fred Fleitz, is preparing to introduce new sanctions to add to the new sanctions package against Russia. As Fleitz stated, Trump feels she has a sense that he's been betrayed, that the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin does not respect him, according to Fred Fleitz. There is a strong likelihood that within the next few weeks, Trump will abandon diplomacy and hit Russia with sanctions. At the same time, as we can see from the latest information, the United States has cancelled talks with the Russians on normalizing relations. This unfortunate news for the Kremlin was announced by the official representative of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova. The next round of negotiations between the US and Russia on normalizing bilateral relations, which had previously been announced by Moscow for the coming days, will not take place because Washington unilaterally canceled the consultations where they had planned to discuss the removal of mutual irritants and normalization. We hope that the pause they have taken will not be too long, says Masha. And these negotiations, which we have been observing successfully, were held in person in Riyadh and Istanbul. Nevertheless, at this point, they will not take place. When they will resume is unknown, but it is clearly a bad sign for Masha and for the Kremlin. Again, without any explanation, against the backdrop of Trump recently having a conversation with Putin, who, as we recall, congratulated him on his birthday. But none of this worked. And finally, here's another piece of news, rather spicy, I would say. The Russian Foreign Intelligence Service has accused the intelligence agencies of Ukraine and Britain of preparing a false flag operation, attempting to pass themselves off as Russians. The Foreign Intelligence Service reports that they thwarted a plan in which Kyiv and London were preparing an attack using Russian torpedoes attention ships of the United States Navy. According to the SVR statement, the plan was for some of the torpedoes to detonate at a safe distance from the American ship, while one would fail to go off and be presented to the public as evidence of Russia's malicious activity, the SVR spies claim. Ukraine, together with accomplices from Northern European countries, plans to recover anchor mines in the Baltic Sea. Just think about it of Russian manufacture. And these mines will be presented as if they were placed by Russia to carry out sabotage on international trade routes. All of this is being done, I quote, to escalate the Ukrainian conflict and push Washington to continue providing military aid to Ukraine. Well, it's certainly an interesting story. Previously, the intelligence services of NATO countries, on the contrary, claimed that Russia was preparing new provocations in the Baltic. Now, as we can see, it seems that Russia has decided to act preemptively to get ahead of things. So now, of course, all of this will be, investigated, all this SVR nonsense. But what if there's a grain of truth in this? What if something really was being prepared, but it was actually by Russia? And because they found out that this information had become known to Western intelligence agencies, possibly Ukrainian intelligence as well, they decided to abruptly shut everything down and cancel the plan. What do you think, friends, what really happened in the Baltic? What happened with Russia's foreign intelligence service? Why did this bizarre message appear? How do you explain this, friends? Thank you for watching.